What's up, Gear Immortals? Trey Xavier here with Warren Huart from Produce Like a Pro. How are you doing, dude?
I'm good, mate. How the devil are you?
Good to see you, real good. So we're here today at 1008 Studios, and Warren here is going to give us his top 5 pop songwriting tips for Metalheads. And I think this is really important because as much as I love metal, and I do, I think it kind of lacks in the songwriting department a lot of the time, and I think it's got a lot of stuff that it can learn from sort of pop music, and you've been there, so lay it on me.
Well, this is interesting because this is a fantastic question. Because I have a question for you. Yeah. I recorded that Alive and Burning album, the DVD with Black Veil Brides. I also mixed it.
Yeah.
And they, how can I put this delicately? They have a push-pull relationship with the rock world. Is that the best way of describing it?
I think that's a beautiful way of describing it. Very artful.
Yeah, it's very artful. Where they are very successful. They make a lot of money. They have a huge audience. All the things that we all want in life. And, you know, there's obviously the pretty boy aspect that people probably don't like. But, you know, there's attractive people in rock and roll, isn't there, in metal?
Sure.
Okay,
absolutely.
Cool. It seems to me the defining thing for that band is the fact that they have songs that kids can sing along with.
Yes, and I think that there's an element of the metal community that finds accessibility to be an antithesis of the metal principle or something. I think that's bullshit. I think accessibility and catchy songwriting is extremely important, and I think it was present in a lot of the classic metal stuff that these sort of true cult metalheads,
You're touching where I'm going.
It's, you know, it's all there. Run to the hills.
Go back.
Huge, big, sexy hook. And they were focusing on the songwriting a lot.
Right. Tip number 1.
Tip number 1.
Listen to Black Sabbath's first record.
Great idea.
That could literally be the end of the statement.
Yeah.
And when I go and meet guys like you, we always end up bonding. I think we did when we first met, bonding over that first record. Because it's pretty much the birth, we can argue about it, but it's the birth of what we would call heavy metal. It's dark, it's scary. The album cover alone is just terrifying because you're like, is that a witch? What is that woman? And then it starts off dong, with the church bells, and it's doing it now. I'm a little kid and all your hairs are standing on end like, you know, bong, down, la, 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 la. I mean, that tritone right at the beginning. But
set the stage.
The melodies. Generals gather in their masses, just like witches. I mean, it's freaking hooky. And the guitar riffs are hooky. So I thank you for starting off that conversation because, yes, number 1 tip would be listen to the classics, but go right back. Go back to Sabbath. Sabbath's first record. Every song is hooky like crazy, but it still captures the darkness. This is my theory. And this is my theory when it comes to all genres of music. Is that it's easy to do the two opposites. It's easy to write a pop song. I think it is. I think you can do, hopefully people understand this, people can do a 6/4, 1/5 chord progression because it's so familiar. It's Journey, it's freaking Let It Be, it's like every other song you've ever heard has that chord progression. It's also easy to be really cool and artsy. It just is. It's really cool to do a freaking 7/4 breakdown, going into a 9/8 section, going back into just like 2/4. These are all easy things to do. What is the difficult thing to do? And why people cop out? All of us, in any genre, why do we cop out? It's the thing in the middle.
Yeah.
That is
something
the hard
that's interesting and catchy.
And catchy and memorable and makes you come back for more. So to me, it's like, number 1 tip, search out the music that inspires you. So when you're in that place and you're thinking that you're going to sell out and be too pop, go to the classics.
Yeah.
Tip number 2. So this is a tip that I think is a really smart exercise that was just done by Disturbed with Sound of Silence. Take a great pop song as an exercise with your band. I mean, something as folky as Simon and Garfunkel and turn that into a huge rock power ballad. Or do the opposite. Take a beautiful pop power ballad and frickin' treble the tempo. Do something to challenge yourself. Because if you do that, you'll learn a lesson. You'll learn about pop songs, and you'll also challenge yourself to make something really, really cool and hooky. And
I think that's a great idea, and just having, getting into even the little fine pieces of the arrangement and the chord progressions and how the melodies work against the chords and stuff like that, building tension. It's super important, and a lot of that is lost in metal, just from the blaring insanity of it.
Tip number 3. Tip number Trey. This is probably more of a production tip, but I think it's part of the songwriting idea, because these days production and songwriting is inherently linked. Why do I say that? I say that because, for instance, when I send songs to record labels, whatever that means, when I send them to A&R guys, if I send them a vocal, they all say that you can listen to a vocal acoustic, and I heard the hit. The kid just sent me this, 2-track of like an acoustic guitar, but I knew it was a #1 smash hit, and absolute baloney. These days, just to get noticed on any level, your production has to be up here. Let's be honest. It's like you need to be competing. And one of the biggest things I've noticed, and I think we talked about this before, is that the lack of dynamics in quite a lot of metal. That you can manipulate or lose great songwriting by not having dynamics. The thing about Nirvana, which is a great lesson, was that kind of like ding 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 ding. It's sort of dumb, and then here I am now, and then the chorus came in and it smashed you over the head. So obviously you don't just want to copy Nirvana production, but there's a lesson to be learned in that. Then use some tips. Come down in your verses, or at least come down in your pre-chorus before it, so when that chorus comes in, it hits home. Don't be afraid of dynamics in songwriting, because it's all linked. Production and songwriting these days is one and the same. I have sent the same song with different productions to different people and got different responses just based on the production.
Yeah, and I think in metal a lot of times it winds up being left to the engineer to be pulling the verse down by a dB and bringing up the chorus or whatever, and little stupid crap like that shouldn't be this sort of post-production thing. It should be built into the song so that you don't have to be manipulating the production and the mix.
I think that was the #1. It's a good point, very good point. That was the #1 thing that I think set Andy Wallace apart in the 90s, and why he mixed basically every huge rock album in the 90s, was because he knew how to use mute on his SSL. For real, people would give him 4 guitars on the left, 4 guitars on the right, a harmony part, an arpeggio, and a line all going at once, and he'd go mute, 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 mute. He'd have heavy bass, drums, and vocals.
Yeah.
And it was simple, but it made it more powerful, because those guitars just came in like a wall of guitars, as opposed to a wall of guitars and 15 different counter melodies playing at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think the lesson from this tip number 3 is that production and songwriting are linked. Because if you've got dominant guitar lines and melody lines mixed in with those choruses, that's the other hook. And do you want 2 hooks? Do you want your vocal line to be the hook, or are you trying to sell this really cool, great guitar line at the same time? So it's important to realize that production is a massive part of songwriting these days. Production is songwriting these days.
Yeah.
Give me dynamics.
Give them to me.
Release the dynamics, precious!
Tip number 4. Harmonies.
Harmonies. Very important.
It's a weird one. You don't have to have full-blown Queen harmonies, although if you did, I'd be very happy, being a huge Queen fan. But you've got your beautiful melody. And I think one of the things, here's an interesting story. When I worked with Aerosmith, I noticed something with Joe's thought process as a guitar player. He left thirds out all the time, which is very rock. The classic rock thing is root 5-1, root 5-1s, octave 1 obviously. And those are the classic rock chords that we expect to hear when we hear AC/DC or any of the classic rock bands that we grew up with. And that extended to all of his guitar ideas and all of his riffs and all his chordal playing and all his arpeggios. And the reason why he did that is because Stephen, who's obviously one of the great rock singers and one of the great rock writers, sings a lot of melodies off of thirds. And there's also that blues thing that we built off, where the third was always nebulous because you were taking minor thirds and bending them to major thirds. Now think about this. If you've got you're coming from a classic rock place and you're trying to bring it into metal, something really classy and long lasting, you keep the thirds out of the chords. It allows the singer to manipulate those thirds, More importantly, it doesn't clutter the vocal melody. Because a great thing like playing an E major chord is a melody like on a G sharp, a high G sharp above that, a major third is a beautiful point for a start off of a melody.
Yep.
But if you've got a guitar riff or whatever that's moving around in that area, playing off the third and the fourth, you're cluttering your ear for the major third. But getting back to the harmony thing, you're playing your root 5 octaves on your guitars, whatever voicings you're using. You stay out of the thirds, let the vocals put harmonies in there. Even if they're really super low under the vocal, it will sit that vocal out front. So I think, again, don't be afraid to use harmonies. And don't be afraid to build your melodies around the thirds of chords because, yeah, they're prettier, they're pop. But that's one of the secrets. One of the things when you listen to a Beatles song, you know, you'll hear a lot of melodies built on the thirds of the chords.
Building on that really quick, metal guys have a tendency to do these like parallel thirds harmonies and like scalar harmonies and not really take into consideration the notes from the chord. And I think building harmonies around the chords as they're passing by, using notes from those chords makes way more sense and sounds a lot more cohesive than these like Iron Maiden guitar harmonies, which is kind of what they default to.
No, it's a great idea. Really, really important thing you touched on. When I'm doing anything rock that's not pure pop, I love pedal tones. If there is like an A that's going through like 2 chords that can still sing the same lyric with the same tempo, the same everything, if that works over 2 chords, obviously like an A major and a D, makes perfect sense. It's the root of one, it's the 5 of the other, and if it drops to an F sharp minor, suddenly it's the minor third of that chord. And if that can stay there, it will provide support for the lead vocal without prettifying it too much. But I do think what I love about harmonies, even blended in low, is it really encourages the sing-along aspect.
Yeah.
You know, I love having something that makes it just pretty enough that doesn't make it too sort of, I don't want to use that word, too...
Sugary.
Sugary.
Saccharine.
Saccharine, that's a word.
I mean, I love that shit, but I know there's a lot of crybaby metalheads who will not listen to you and are railing angrily against their computer screens right now, like because they want metal to be different from pop. But do you ever listen to the band Amaranth?
Yes.
They're like, first of all, #1 favorite band, but just the fusion of metal and pop is perfect. They do it better than anybody else, and I think they're like the nexus point for metal and pop. And actually, one of their big hits is the Nexus.
Well, the thing about great metal is that done well, and this is a compliment, the musicians are insane. Say guitar players are sitting alone in their rooms, and I did it myself as a kid, practicing guitar from anywhere from 4 to 8 to 10 hours a day, every single day, on 6, 7 string guitars. You're like just practicing like crazy. And if we're going to limit ourselves to root 5s and 1s and not build around thirds and harmonies and all the stuff that we can do with vocals, so it gets a little tiring. What I love is like metal guys listen to Beethoven.
Yeah.
You know, they listen to, you know, ever since Ingvar Malmsteen, they listen to like Paganini. You know? But at the end of the day, that's interesting and cool because they're listening to music that has a lot of melody and a lot of incredible structure and time signatures. But if you were to stop a person on the street, if they did know Beethoven, what would they do? They go da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, or they go bam bam ba dum ba dum da dum 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 da dum da da dum da 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 dum dum da da da. They're all like melodies that you cannot get out of your head.
Right.
You hear the 5th or the 9th symphony or Feuerlies, da-da-da-da-da-da. Once you've heard those pieces of music, they're embedded in your head for the rest of your life. And I love Beethoven, and I know his work really, really well, but there's quite a few pieces I have to go back and re-listen to.
To remember how they go.
So what's the lesson there? Beethoven, arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest classical composer of all time, influences all music even now, yet he had pop songs. Tip number 5. I think the biggest tip I can give is to encourage people to do this, and that is set aside time every day to challenge yourself and think outside of the box. That could be the Chiron. Think outside of the box. Because we've been talking about that with a lot of stuff, and I think it's the overall feeling because I know that some of the best songs ever written were rock songs. and heavy rock songs. And they're some of the hugest hits of all time. Number one biggest selling band in the world, the Beatles. What's the number two? It's not Michael Jackson. Zeppelin. It's like 300,
Really?
200 million. Yeah. So Led Zeppelin are like 200 million albums sold and counting. And they're a freaking rock band. Sometimes they were super heavy, sometimes they were acoustic guitars. But the point is, and they blended genres and everything, like In Through the Outdoor. I mean, Fall in the Rain, probably the most played song ever on classic rock radio, you know, and that drum. What made that band so great was the fact that it just blended genres in a way, though, that was really unique because they never lost sense of themselves. So, set aside time to research and bring in music that you love into your writing, because you don't have to look very far to find the most credible, greatest bands of all time and see that they've done that. All I know is that when I turn on classic rock radio in Los Angeles, 95.5 or 93.1, what do I hear? I hear All of My Love and Fall in the Rain, back to back to back to back to back. And then about every 5 times I hear those two songs, I hear a different Zeppelin song.
Yeah. What I've noticed, that despite metal fans being very close-minded in a lot of ways, metal musicians who I talk to and interview, and I do a lot of interviews with a lot of bands that these close-minded fans are listening to, expecting that they're also only listening to metal, and they're listening to everything from top 40 saccharine pop to world music, hip-hop, all this other stuff way outside of the music that they're playing.
Metal's the only genre where actually people give a shit. It is. So there's that famous quote from Def Leppard, which goes to everything you've just been talking about. So it was full-blown, like, 89, whatever it was, right in the middle of the big albums, the Hysteria, and when they were, like, the biggest band in the world, Pyromania, you know, those were, like, the biggest albums in the world at the time. And they were being interviewed by some, whatever rock magazine it was, and it was just like, you know, what do you do? What's your inspiration? Who do you listen to? Basically having the same kind of conversation we're having. Mm-hmm. And he's like, we're not competing against rock bands. We sell records, we're successful. We're competing against Janet Jackson. And I remember being a kid, you know, and playing rock and all this kind of stuff and just saying, they just admitted that they're not, they want to sell records, they want to be successful, they want to be a stadium band, they want people to love their brand of rock and roll. They're thinking outside the box and they're realizing we're not just trying to make the greatest rock record, we're trying to make the greatest rock record that people that would buy a Janet Jackson record would also buy it. A few years ago, I had the privilege of going to see this massive car collection, which was owned by the ex-owner of Guitar Center and 2 of the guys from Def Leppard with them. It was Rick, the drummer, and, oh my God, the guitar player that was
Phil Collin.
No, the guy, the new guy joined in 89.
Oh, Vivian Campbell.
Vivian Campbell.
Is that it?
Yeah. And, you know, I don't mind sometimes asking you awkward questions. So what would be the one question you'd want to ask 2 guys of Def Leppard? Like, you know, like, you kind of want to say in the back of your mind, why aren't you making the great records that you used to make? So I didn't quite phrase it like that. I just said, hey, are you guys, you know, going to work with Mutt Lange again? You know, obviously when you guys were working together, it was incredible. And they said, yeah, we'd love to. But, you know, he's moving on. He's doing new stuff. And I was like, well, what's it like working with him? They're like, he was insane. They said he would go into the vocal booth and sing all of the harmony parts and then throw them in and get them to copy his parts. But it's an inspiring thing to go back and listen to some of those bands that were able to cross it over. And you don't have to go as full-blown pop as Def Leppard. You don't have to do Pour Some Sugar on Me. Although I wouldn't mind if there was a song like that on the radio again. It'd be freaking awesome. If there was a rock band that could write a song that hooky and be a top 10 hit again, wouldn't that be amazing?
Could you imagine being a stripper? Like they're just, you know, like thank God I don't have to hear fucking Pour Some Sugar on Me again.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Trey Xavier.
For the record, I don't like strippers. So to sort of summarize your tip number 5, it's get out of your own musical neighborhood. Take a walk on the wild side. listen to stuff that you normally wouldn't with an open mind.
And I think set aside a time every day to do that.
Yeah.
To be honest, even if it's just 20 minutes, just set aside some time. It's amazing. YouTube's pretty kind of fun. Spotify's fun. Any of those things that you go and find something, if you follow like a suggested route from anywhere, you'd be amazing.
The rabbit hole. You go to set a little time, go down the rabbit hole.
Enjoy the rabbit hole for half an hour.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. Thanks, Warren, for your 5 tips. Apply these, and I want to hear what you come up with. So
please leave comments and questions below. Maybe I'll have him answer for you. No, I'll answer.
Yeah. And then he'll tell you to have a marvelous time recording and mixing.
Do I say that?
Once I've seen you say it once or twice.
Once or twice, yeah. But anyway, have a marvelous time recording, mixing, and songwriting.
And songwriting.
So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.